Hey guys, if you're here, I'm assuming you're trying to get your Certified Strength and Conditioning Certification, aka the CSCS, through the National Strength and Conditioning Association, also known as the NSCA. This is actually a video that I've been putting off for the longest, but I'm going to go ahead and do a little breakdown today. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start with a little background about myself. My name is Joseph Nguyen. I'm a recently new grad. I just got my doctorate in physical therapy a month ago. I did the CSCS during my second to last semester of PT school. I studied for about 3 weeks for it, and I've been consistently doing barbell strength training or powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting for about 7 years, 8 years consistently. Beforehand, it was just kind of like on and off. In addition to that, I actually studied to take the CSCS in 2014, which was probably 6 years ago. I actually used this book. It was part of my undergrad. This is the 3rd edition of the book. There's a 4th edition out there right now. But if you can see, I kind of highlighted the whole book already. So I did reference this a lot during my studying. I did get the 4th edition to study for the exam. I would like to also mention that although I did not take the exam those many years ago that I was prepping for it, I stayed consistent with a lot of the things I learned from my studying and kept applying it throughout the 7 years that I kept training. So I've been doing a lot of my self-programming and utilizing a lot of the things I learned from the CSCS content and from other companies' philosophies in terms of training. All right, so this is kind of like a table of contents of my personal study notebook for the CSCS. If you notice, I break it down into tabs here just to keep things organized. So let's start off with testing info. I put down, the important stuff, where the test is, what time, exam breakdown. So you want to focus on areas that have the most questions, but also you want to focus on your weak areas if you know them. Let's look at these quizzes here. So these are the quizzes at the end of each chapter in the book. These are really helpful. I would look at those. And I went into nutrition a little bit more in depth than I probably should have, just because I didn't really know. Honestly, this is out of our scope. Just focus on the main things like the macros, fats, carbs, proteins, and just how to calculate those in that regard. This was probably the most unfamiliar things in regards to the test for me, drills and things like that. I would recommend, if you are unfamiliar with drills, to look it up on YouTube, just because the book only has pictures. Another thing I would really focus on are norms. So being able to recognize what is regular, what is irregular, just so that when you see it in an athlete, you know what to work on. And I found a lot of practice quizzes or questions online. If you just look up NSCA, CSCS, practice quiz exams, you'll find a lot of content. There's also Facebook groups that have a lot of good questions of the day. And if you see here, I kind of took a screenshot of important boxes, I think, or what I thought at the time was important. Honestly, I would focus on this box right here in regards to programming, resistance training, things like that. If it has something to do with programming or creating a exercise plan, I would look at it. Otherwise, a lot of the boxes are just kind of like for your own benefit. So I mentioned Facebook groups earlier. This is a pretty useful one. It's probably the most useful one, in my opinion. It's the official NSCA CSCS study group. So you can find that on Facebook there. And I want to look at the files here. And if you open up ESC4 corrections, this is going to show you the corrections in the 4th edition of the book. There are some errors, so I would make sure that you make these corrections first before you study in detail. And then we go back here. Another useful group that I found was strength and conditioning study group. Matt's in charge of this one. He's also a fellow physical therapy student. He posts a lot of good stuff. So in addition to a lot of the content I just showed you, I utilized every resource I could find that includes learning from people that have already taken the exam, whether they failed it or passed it. There's a lot of good content out there on YouTube. I would listen to their videos as I worked out and just kind of reflect and learn from them. My recommendations for those people on the fence about getting it, if you're trying to work with athletes, I would definitely recommend getting the CSCS because it's the gold standard in the industry. Even if you're just like the average Joe, I think there's a lot of good content within the CSCS material that would amplify your own training knowledge. If you're in the medical or clinical field, I think a lot of the content is useful if you're going to work with people and help them with their exercise. The content that they teach with the CSCS is a little bit more than what they teach us at that medical, clinical educational level. The main reason that I got the CSCS is because it's a well-known certification amongst many professions. It allows them to know that you know what you're talking about when it comes to that area of topic. It's kind of like your certificate of proof, like, hey, I know what I'm talking about, I passed the exam. So even if you already know a lot of the content, I would still recommend getting the CSCS. And if you don't know it, I would recommend getting it because it's gonna just supplement your knowledge base. Honestly, I'm not here to convince you to take the CSCS. If you're watching this video, then I assume that you've already convinced yourself to take it. So hopefully a lot of the things I mentioned earlier helps you on your path and journey to accomplishing your goal. Don't stress about it, just put in the work and